naked, forced on her knees, with her hands over her head.
It is 2025 in the United States. Just before dawn on May 3rd, a violent tragedy struck a quiet university district in Columbia, South Carolina. A 22-year-old woman was sleeping peacefully at a friend's place, completely unaware that a gunman was breaking in. We are looking at the case of Logan Federico. At just 22, this native of Waxhaw, North Carolina, had a bright future waiting for her. Everyone called her Lolo, a sweet nickname given to her by her younger brother, Jacob. Those two were absolutely inseparable. Her dad had his own name for her, Spicy. It fit perfectly because she was independent, headstrong, and always marched to the beat of her own drum. She and her father were incredibly close, and she even considered him her hero. Plus, the girl was a serious hustler.
Begging for her life. Begging for her hero, her father.
Juggling university classes and 2 different jobs, she was dead set on her dream of teaching. She adored children and spent her spare time mentoring local youth. She pulled shifts at a busy sports bar in Charlotte, where everyone from the staff to the regulars absolutely loved her. Towards the end of April 2025, Logan arranged a trip to Columbia, South Carolina. She wanted to catch up with a college buddy staying at a rental on Cypress Street, right in the Shandon area. Road trips were her thing. She was always bouncing between the Carolinas to see her pals.
Me! That couldn't be there. She was 5'3". She weighed 115 pounds.
When she got there on May 2nd, she shot her dad a quick text to say she had made it safely for the weekend. That Friday evening, the crew hit up downtown Columbia for some fun before heading back to the house to crash. The area was a quiet, tree-lined suburb, so nobody had a clue that anything was wrong as they drifted off to sleep. Little did they know, a monster was lurking outside in the shadows. Police later revealed that a man was already midway through a violent rampage across the region. Earlier that same evening, a thief had hit a nearby house, swiping a gun and some car keys.
Bang! Dead. Gone. She was executed.
We are not talking about a rookie here. This guy was a career criminal who really should have been behind bars long ago. With a stolen weapon in hand and confidence high from his recent crimes, he targeted the very house where Logan and her friends were sleeping. Just past midnight on May 3rd, he stalked toward the property, hunting for his next victim. Before the sun came up that morning, he managed to break into the Cypress Street home while everyone inside was out cold. Authorities believe he jimmied a door or window open. Once he was in, he moved silently through the house, using a flashlight to cut through the darkness.
And I haven't heard a damn word from Byron Gibson in South Carolina. Not one word. 4 months, no communication.
He ghosted through the rooms, snatching wallets, cards, and anything else of value he could get his hands on. Finally, he made his way into the bedroom where Logan was resting. She woke up to a nightmare, a stranger looming over her bed, weapon drawn. He was not holding a small handgun either. He had a massive 12-gauge shotgun. In a split second, the robbery became a life-or-death situation. He dragged her out of bed and threw her to the ground. Holding the gun on her, he made her kneel with her hands up, leaving her completely defenseless. You can only imagine the sheer terror she must have felt in those final moments. Standing just 5'3" and weighing 115 pounds, she did not stand a chance against the large, armed man standing over her. Heartbreakingly, he ignored her begging. From point-blank range, he fired one round right into her chest. The whole thing was over in a flash. The gunshot woke the others instantly. They rushed to her room, only to find their friend collapsed and losing a lot of blood. That is when they spotted the silhouette near the exit. One of them managed to see the guy for a split second before he sprinted out the door. He jumped into his getaway car and peeled out, vanishing into the night. Frantic neighbors and friends started calling 911 as the horror of the situation sank in. First responders got there fast, but they found Logan unresponsive with a severe wound to her chest. Her friends were in shock, covered in blood from trying to help her. They had applied pressure with towels and tried to keep her awake, but she never said a word. Medics worked furiously, performing CPR and trying everything to bring her back, but it was too late. Devastatingly, her heart stopped and she was declared dead, right there in the house. Detectives found one used shotgun shell on the floor, but aside from that, there was almost no evidence pointing to who did it. The killer wore gloves and dark clothes, so there were no prints or tracks to follow. Logan had not done a single thing to trigger such violence. By sunrise, police tapes circled the property, and a massive manhunt was officially in motion. Officers went door to door looking for leads, and blasted the suspect's description to every police department in the area. K-9 units and patrols searched the vicinity, but a heavy storm rolled in before dawn, washing away evidence and grounding the air support. But then, they got lucky. Logan's credit cards started showing activity at shops in Lexington County, just west of Columbia. The guy was on the run, buying things with the money he had stolen. Security footage at a gas station caught a guy who looked just like their suspect using one of the cards, giving cops a solid lead. Later, they found the stolen car ditched on the side of the road, likely wrecked by the storm. The net was tightening. On Sunday, May 4th, about 36 hours after the attack, the search reached a chaotic conclusion. Deputies in Gaston responded to a house fire and burglary call, only to run smack into the fugitive they had been hunting. The intruder didn't just break into the farmhouse. He allegedly set it ablaze, hoping the inferno would cover his tracks and sow confusion. As flames consumed the property, officers surrounded the perimeter, eventually dragging the suspect through a window just moments before the structure became a death trap. Handcuffs were slapped on him immediately. After a frantic 48-hour manhunt, the elusive predator was finally off the streets. Back at the station in Columbia, investigators confirmed their suspicions. The man in custody was indeed the prime suspect in Logan's homicide. They identified him as 30-year-old Alexander Dickey. Dickey, a South Carolina native with a rap sheet a mile long, was swiftly hit with a laundry list of charges: murder, multiple counts of burglary, weapons possession, grand theft auto, and fraud. A chaotic spree packed into just 2 days. He was processed into the county jail and denied bail, ensuring he would stay behind bars while awaiting trial. On May 5th, officials from the Columbia Police Department took to the podium, announcing the capture and reassuring a terrified community that the immediate danger had passed. They detailed how Dickey had been on a rampage, hitting multiple properties around the time Logan was killed, and promised to pursue the maximum penalty the law would allow. While the arrest brought a collective sigh of relief to the neighborhood and Logan's devastated family, for the detectives, the heavy lifting was just beginning. Their task now was to connect the dots, meticulously documenting every move Dickey made to ensure he answered for every single violation committed during his violent tear. But as the dust settled, one question dominated the conversation. Who is Alexander Dickey? Born and raised in South Carolina, he started building his criminal resume before he even left his teens. Since his 18th birthday, Dickey has racked up no fewer than 48 charges across 14 separate incidents, escalating from minor shoplifting to severe, violent felonies. His specialty was property crimes, smashing into vehicles and homes to strip them of anything valuable. However, he wasn't afraid to get physical. His record included a strong-arm robbery in his early 20s. Over the years, he did 3 separate stints in state prison. He was locked up from late 2014 to mid-2017 for grand larceny and burglary, went back for a few months in 2018 on a drug charge, and returned for just over a year, between 2019 and 2020 for robbery. Every single time, the system let him out early on parole, requiring him to serve only a fraction of his actual sentence. He was a habitual rule breaker, constantly violating his probation with new infractions that should have sent him back to a cell for years. Yet, for reasons that baffle observers, the hammer never dropped. By 2023, despite more than a decade of wreaking havoc, Alexander Dickey was walking free. That same year, he was busted yet again for burglary. He was looking at a 5 to 10 year stretch, but the prosecution cut a deal and the judge let him walk with time served. At that point, he had spent 411 days in jail waiting for his day in court. But this lenient sentence was actually the result of a catastrophic clerical error. A massive chunk of Dickey's criminal history was missing from the file, so the court treated the 2023 incident as if it were his first ever burglary offense. The court had no idea they were dealing with a career criminal because the state law enforcement database didn't have his fingerprints on file from a 2014 arrest. Officials later admitted that, had the full scope of his rap sheet been visible, that plea deal would have been off the table, and Dickey would have been securely locked away for several more years. Instead, he strolled out of jail in 2024 on probation, free to find his next victim. By the spring of 2025, the 30-year-old was living as a drifter, surviving on whatever he could steal. In the wake of the tragedy, the legal machinery moved against Alexander Dickey with lightning speed. On June 25, 2025, a Richland County grand jury handed down a 12-count indictment, charging him with Logan's murder, 2 counts of first-degree burglary, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, credit card fraud, and more. Dickey was appointed a public defender and stood before a judge for his initial hearing, where bond was swiftly denied. Despite the gravity of the accusations, he stood stone-faced as the charges were read. Meanwhile, the case turned into a lightning rod for public outrage and political maneuvering. The community and Logan's family were calling for blood, demanding the harshest justice available, with many voices clamoring for the death penalty. The pressure grew so intense that South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson took the rare step of inserting himself into the local proceedings. On September 30th, 2025, Wilson fired off a letter to the prosecuting attorney, strongly urging them to put capital punishment on the table for Dickey. Wilson argued that because the killing happened during the commission of a burglary, it qualified as an aggravating circumstance under state law, making Dickey eligible for execution. He gave the local prosecutor a strict deadline to declare his strategy, hinting that the Attorney General's office was ready to seize control of the case if they didn't pursue the death penalty. This sparked a highly public showdown between the state's top legal official and the local prosecutor, Brian Gibson, who wasn't afraid to push back. Gibson slammed the AG's demand as reckless, arguing that jumping straight to the ultimate punishment without due diligence was premature. Considering the investigation was only a few months old, Gibson insisted his team needed time to comb through every shred of evidence before making a life-or-death decision. Not backing down, the Attorney General dispatched Melody Brown, a senior litigator specializing in capital cases, to join the Richland County team and ensure the prosecution was bulletproof. While the prosecutors engaged in a public tug-of-war, Dickey's defense team kept a low profile. At his arraignment, Alexander Dickey formally entered a plea of not guilty to all counts. With no trial date on the calendar, attorneys on both sides began the slow grind of discovery and pre-trial motions. The governor of South Carolina weighed in as well, calling the crime preventable and demanding accountability across the board. The brutality of Logan's murder sent shockwaves far beyond the state lines. In the weeks following the tragedy, hundreds of mourners flooded Waxhaw for a celebration of life, creating a sea of pink, Logan's favorite color, in her honor. As friends and relatives shared stories of her radiant spirit, her father, Stephen Federico, channeled his grief into a crusade for reform. In late September 2025, Stephen took the stand before a U.S. House Judiciary Subcommittee on Victims of Crime. There, he painted a gut-wrenching picture of his daughter's final moments, describing how she begged for mercy before being senselessly slaughtered by a repeat offender who had no business being a free man. Is greater than. I need you to do something for me. As I tell you this story, picture your own kids. Imagine your child coming home after a night out with friends, getting into bed, and drifting off to sleep. Imagine the horror of an intruder storming the room, jarring her awake, and dragging her naked body from the sheets. She was forced to her knees, hands locked behind her head, pleading for survival, screaming for her protector, her dad, me, who wasn't there to save her. She stood just 5'3", weighed 115 pounds, one shot, dead, erased. And the reason? Alexander Devontae Dickey, a predator with 39 arrests and 25 felonies, was walking the streets. Does that sit right with you? Is that the best we can do for our families? Is that how you protect your own children? By all rights, he earned a sentence of 140 years. But take a wild guess at how long he actually sat in a cell. I could fill a lecture hall detailing exactly how the system collapsed, how South Carolina let Logan down, the breakdown in communication. But here's the reality. You awoke a sleeping giant and crossed the wrong father. Because I'm shouting this from the mountaintops. And I won't stop screaming until someone fixes this. Is greater than. The footage ignited a firestorm online, forcing officials to pay attention. By October 2025, lawmakers in Washington were getting involved. To the public, Logan Federico's death underscores a terrifying flaw in the system. A single clerical error and a soft plea deal were enough to trigger a completely avoidable catastrophe. Her family finds a sliver of peace, knowing her tragedy sparked a movement, a campaign to ensure no other parent grieves a child, because the justice system couldn't hold a dangerous man.